In June 2021, devout Christian Mee Kuen Chong, also known as Deborah, vanished without a trace. Friends had no idea what to do in this situation. This was extremely out of character for her, and Deborah was a vulnerable woman. But just as the investigation began to heat up, a harrowing discovery was made, and a long series of disturbing surveillance camera clips would lead authorities to a cold-hearted killer. This video covers a true crime story that wrapped up only 1 week ago here in the UK, and covers the first woman to have her sentencing broadcast live on television. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, folks. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to another video by Coffeehouse Crime. Today we're looking at the case of Mee Kuen Chong. Now, Coffeehouse Crime is all about posting true crime and strange cases with a caffeinated twist, so if that's your kind of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel. And now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee, buckle up, and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Mee Kuen Chong. Welcome back to England, folks. Our story today takes us to the northwest of London. When you hear the name Wembley, one thing often springs to mind. Wembley Stadium is the king of all landmarks in the local area. But there is much more to the old suburb of London than you may think. Wembley has been around for hundreds of years. Derived from the Old English name Wemberley, meaning Wember Meadow, the village of Wembley started in 1547 with only 6 houses. Since then, it has grown to one of London's largest suburbs, with a population of just over 100,000 residents. But Wembley has had its fair share of hardships too. Its place in London's economy started to become less relevant after the Second World War, in which more than 9,000 bombs had damaged over half of all residential homes in the area. In fact, bombs are still being found to this very day, and in May 2015, builders working near Wembley Stadium found a 50-kilogram bomb which still posed a severe risk to life. No worries, this was later safely detonated. Stark reminders aside, Wembley's position still makes it an extremely expensive place to live. And even the cheaper houses here often sell for over £1 million or $1.2 million. Nevertheless, it's here that we find the home and life of Mee Kuen Chong, who went by the nickname Deborah. Mee Kuen Chong was a Malaysian at heart. She was born and raised in Kuala Lumpur, but eventually she moved to the United Kingdom. Moving to the area of Wembley in 2004, Deborah shared her 2-storey home on Chaplin Road with a lodger. She was a congregation member at the Emmanuel Centre Church in Edgware, located around 6 miles north of her home. And being a devout Christian, she regularly attended church services and Holy Spirit evenings. Neighbours described the lively woman as eccentric but pleasant. She regularly went around her neighbours' homes for tea and a chat, and being a church and choir fanatic, she could often be heard singing throughout the house. Being an active member of the church, Deborah met many people over the years, which of course helped to integrate into the local community of Wembley. Socially speaking, this did very well for her, and being the extroverted woman that she was, many of those she eventually crossed paths with became friends. But not everything was going well in Deborah's life, and unfortunately she suffered from several mental health issues, and was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and acute stress. Now, luckily, Deborah did have several people she could rely on, and although none of her family lived nearby, she did have a lodger and several friends from the church. And one of those she became close with was a 38-year-old woman who went by the name of Gemma Mitchell. Previously living in Australia for 7 years, Gemma Mitchell was an osteopath that decided to move back to the UK in 2015. Her mother and sister lived nearby in Brent, just north of Wembley, and so with that said, she decided to move in with them. Now, Gemma is from a relatively affluent background. The young woman was privately educated before she enrolled in King's College London, where she graduated with a degree in human sciences, including a course in experimental anatomy. The family used to have strong finances too. Her mother used to work in the British Foreign Office in Australia, and the family home in London is estimated to be worth around £4 million or $5 million. But unfortunately, they seemed to have fallen on more challenging times. The house was now mostly derelict and needed urgent repairs. Gemma considered herself to be a committed devout Christian, something that Deborah also labelled herself as. And you can probably guess this is how both of them had met. It was through the church in August 2020. Unfortunately, Gemma couldn't work as an osteopath in the United Kingdom. With no legitimate transfer between Australian or British practices, she was basically left without a job. However, after becoming close with Deborah, Gemma offered her services as a spiritual healer to help combat her mental health conditions. Now, obviously, this was not going to do anything to help Deborah's ongoing issues, and since her schizophrenia seemed to be worsening, she was prescribed stronger medication. By the spring of 2021, those around her described her to be vulnerable and prone to erratic behaviour, and in the recent months, she'd become obsessed with Prince Charles and Boris Johnson. It's quite a sad story when you think about it, but Deborah had a parasocial relationship with Prince Charles, and believed she could talk to him through YouTube videos. Deborah often set the dinner table for Prince Charles and Boris Johnson as if they were going to appear any moment. And after sending them several bizarre letters, a mental health referral was made. After being enrolled into a healthcare facility for a fortnight, she was prescribed a new course of medication, and although she didn't want to take it, her friends persuaded her otherwise. Now, for the most part, life returned back to normal after this, and although friends were concerned for Deborah's mental health, summer was right around the corner, and there were sunnier days to look forward to. But summer would never arrive for Deborah, as on June 11th, 2021, she suddenly disappeared. On June 11th, 2021, Deborah's lodger became alarmed when he could no longer find or contact her. And with the current status of her mental health, he knew it was wise to inform authorities immediately. Deborah's lodger had seen her the very day prior, so she couldn't have been gone for very long. Surveillance footage recorded on June 9th, 2021 confirmed this, showing Deborah walking down Chaplin Road while being accompanied by him. It was noted that the older woman couldn't walk very well, so if she were on the run, it would have been difficult for her to avoid transport. As the days passed, it became more evident that something unusual had happened to Deborah. She had never disappeared like this before, and with her mental health and physical issues, this painted a very concerning picture to authorities. But despite Deborah's silence, not everyone else was. It was Gemma that informed the lodger that Deborah had returned home to Malaysia to spend time with her family. According to Gemma, Deborah had planned to return home for a year to clear her head. Now, this didn't sit well with officers. To get to Malaysia, Deborah would have likely taken a flight back, but no activity had been recorded on her passport. To add to this, there were no sightings of her leaving her house, no local taxi companies had given her a lift, and no bank activity suggested that she took any public transport. Days turned into weeks, and still no confirmed sightings of Deborah were reported. But after 16 days missing, and just as investigations began to heat up, a very gruesome discovery had been made. Located 200 miles away from Wembley lies a small coastal town named Salcombe, and honestly there is not much to say about it. Salcombe is found in South Devon and sports beautiful beaches and lush countryside, and as you can probably guess, many people visit the area as tourists. But it just turns out that one woman visiting the area on holiday had discovered something much more than she had bargained for. On June 27, 2021, the woman was walking with her family through a wooded area along Bennett Road in Salcombe. And that is when, upon walking down the bottom of some old mossy steps, she found a nightmarish scene. Lying nearby was a decomposing body, and the head was missing.
Emergency.
Hi, I just found a body.
Oh, go ahead, caller. What's your emergency?
I just found a body.
Right, okay. A body, is it? Are they breathing?
No, they're dead. They look like they've possibly been there like a few days or something with some flies and stuff.
Right, okay. Bear with me a second. Let's pop this on.
What's the road?
Yeah, what road are you on?
I'm in Salcombe.
You're in Salcombe, sorry. Let me have a look. I can populate, hopefully, where you are. So, Bennett Road, are you quite near the harbour?
We're up from North Sand Beach. Hang on, we'll just look at Google Maps.
Oh, okay, yeah, so I can see North Sand Bay. Bennett Road, yeah, you are on Bennett Road.
Authorities were called immediately, and soon after arriving, forensic officers found the body had been dumped with a church business card and excerpts from the Bible. Sadly, it was soon learned that the body belonged to Mee Kuen Chong, also known as Deborah, and due to the degree of decomposition, a post-mortem examination could not determine the cause of her death. What it could confirm, though, is that she had suffered a skull fracture along with several other injuries consistent with an assault, and that her head had not been removed by animal activity. Pathologists also estimated that Deborah had been dead for roughly 2 weeks, which matched the time frame of her disappearance. So with the case now classed as a homicide, investigators ramped up their efforts to find her killer. And surprisingly, it didn't take long for them to find a potential suspect. Surveillance footage surrounding Deborah's home revealed some very alarming movements. And as officers scoped all friends who knew of Deborah, they started to set their sights on Gemma. Now, while still alive, Deborah often held spiritual sessions in her garden, and Gemma was often there with her. In fact, many friends claimed that Deborah had told them that Gemma and Jesus were healing her. The two women were close to one another, or at least until the week before Deborah disappeared. Apparently, the two had recently fallen out over money, and of course this intrigued officers. But parking the story here for just a moment, let's focus on who Gemma really is as a person. Studying and then working in osteopathy in Australia, she claimed on a professional website that she was attuned to subjects in neuroanatomy, genetics, and dissection of human cadavers. And as said before, but after she returned to England in 2015, she could no longer continue in her field of profession, and as a result, she has not worked anywhere else ever since. Although Gemma was living with her mother at their family home in Brent, the house desperately needed repair. The rooms were reportedly crammed full of broken furniture and trash, and some were impossible to enter. There were boxes and suitcases, freezers full of food, old mattresses, and building materials everywhere. The kitchen was described as dirty, with rotting food all over the stove, and various pieces of paperwork covered all of its surfaces. The second floor of the property was under renovation, with the walls and ceilings incomplete, and the property had no roof. The bathroom was stained and in a poor state of repair, and the place looked like a hoarder's residence. And this is where Deborah and Gemma begin to clash. Now, Gemma urgently needed money to repair the family home, and apparently Deborah had promised to give her 200 grand to help. But Deborah had a change of heart, and eventually she told Gemma to sell the house and enjoy the money, as life is too short. And in a follow-up message, she said to Gemma that more construction will cost more money that she already doesn't have. There was nothing binding Deborah to pay Gemma the money, and quite frankly, who in the world gives their friend £200,000 for nothing in return? And as you can probably guess, this is where the relationship turned sour, and over the following days, Gemma became more pushy and more aggressive towards Deborah. But on June the 8th, 2021, Deborah finally had enough. She sent a text message to Gemma saying the following: "Until you've sold the house, I don't want you to come to me or my house. I'm stressed to the core." And of course, just 3 days after this, she disappeared. Thankfully, a myriad of surveillance cameras fill in all the gaps of this time frame. At 6:15 AM on the morning of June the 11th, Gemma can be seen leaving her derelict property with a suitcase and a backpack, and at the time, she was wearing a hat. By 6:40 AM, she had changed clothes, put a face covering on, and placed the backpack inside the suitcase. This surveillance footage captures her moving in the direction of Deborah's home. At 7:56 AM, the hat was off. However, she can still be seen with the suitcase and the face mask. We can only guess that over the next 4 hours, Deborah was tragically murdered, because at 12:59 PM, Gemma is again captured by a surveillance camera, this time with the two suitcases in hand. Both of them appeared to be quite heavy, as she struggled to lug both of them around. The smaller bag likely contained Deborah's personal and financial paperwork, which were necessary items for Gemma, as she intended to use this paperwork to forge a will. She then called a taxi to drive her and the two suitcases back towards her address. But as seen in this transcript, she would have to wait a total of 40 minutes until they could pick her up. And by 4:16 in the afternoon, she had returned home with a large blue suitcase back in hand. Later that evening, Gemma travelled to St Thomas's Hospital located in central London to be treated for a broken finger. She claimed to the doctors that she had accidentally shut it in a door. Over the following days, and in an attempt to cover up the crime, Gemma then made several fraudulent emails to a missing persons charity. She even sent a WhatsApp message to Deborah's lodger to say that she had left the country to visit her family. Fast forward several days and Gemma was back on the road. On June 26th at 8:05 in the morning, a surveillance camera across the road from her house recorded her loading the suitcase into a grey Volvo. The grey Volvo wasn't her own car. She had rented it from a vehicle rental company the very night prior. To add to her cunning and sneaky plan, Gemma then reactivated the phone number of a neighbour who had recently died and took it with her as her own source of communication, leaving her own phone at home in a stark attempt to dupe investigators. On the way down to Salcombe, she stopped at a petrol station, where a surveillance camera captured her walking into the shop. And after travelling 200 miles southwest to the coastal town, she then parked her car near Bennett Road at approximately 9:12 p.m. She then dumped the body, and was then seen leaving the area by the same camera 41 minutes later. Now, despite being caught by several surveillance cameras, Gemma thought her plan was going pretty well. But there was one part to her elaborate scheme that not even she could predict. On her way back to London, her rented vehicle blew a tyre, and she was therefore forced to drive into a service station and call for assistance. A repairman named Lee Garden was called to change the wheel on her car, and to this day he can still recall his bizarre encounter with the woman. She appeared to be confused, severely distracted, and insisted that he must not go into the boot of her car, let alone place a tyre in there. To add to this, she wanted to keep the old flat tyre. Lee also said that an odd smell came from the vehicle. It was a musty smell, as if someone had slept in there overnight without any ventilation. And unfortunately, he didn't know this at the time, but that was the smell of death. After having her tyre fixed, Gemma then returned home, where she returned the Volvo and then dumped the blue suitcase on the roof of a shed belonging to one of her neighbours. The very next day, Deborah's decapitated body was discovered. It would take authorities a further 5 days to locate her skull. The evidence before Gemma was pretty damning to say the least, and following all of this information, authorities decided to pay her a little visit at midnight.
Police! Hello there.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good. There's no answer. Sorry, what's your name?
Sorry, we were asleep.
Are you Gemma?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, Gemma. Just hold your hand a second.
Sure,
Come on a second.
Sorry, could I ask
Gemma, do you want to come up?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just want to see them.
Hand just so your hands. Alright, Gemma, at this moment, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. Okay, you don't have to say anything, but you may have a defence. Do not mention one question, something which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence, okay? Once we're in the cuffs,
Am I allowed to...
I'll go explain everything to you. Okay?
Should I get some
Yeah,
shoes
sorry.
on?
What?
If you want to one sec.
Inside?
Who's inside at the moment?
Mother.
Your mother? Okay.
Is it?
If you want to... Oh, can someone lift that up?
Yeah. Let's step back inside.
Is anyone else inside? Just your mum?
Yeah.
There is someone else inside,
No,
or just your
that's
mum?
just my mum, yeah.
Alright, do you want to... Should I bring her out, or...
Bring her in.
Bring her in?
For a minute.
Right,
yeah.
we're just going to come in for a sec, okay?
Sure.
After taking her into custody, investigators locked the house down and searched for any evidence that could link Deborah to her killer. Inside, they found her personal and financial documents, and a forged will that had been created on Gemma's computer. On this will, Gemma had named herself and her mother as the beneficiaries of Deborah's entire estate, which at the time was valued around £700,000 or $800,000. Authorities were clearly ready to interrogate her, as only 2 days later they began their first formal interview with her, one which was stacked with a mountain of evidence and questions.
And they've said that the person driving the Volvo waited in the car all that time with the windows down and the front door open, the passenger door open, when it was literally chucking it down with rain and it was windy. Why is that, Gemma?
No comment.
The car stank, didn't it, Gemma?
No comment.
Stunk of a dead person.
No comment.
Stunk of Deborah's decomposing body. Is that right, Gemma?
No comment.
Now, is it just me, or can you really feel the sassy anger building up in her cold heart towards the end there? Unless Gemma had a very logical reason as to why she hauled a suitcase to Deborah's and then back to her own home, and then down to Devon where Deborah's body was found, she was legally screwed at this point. In today's world, there is an estimated 950,000 surveillance cameras across London City, so how she thought making a 12-mile trip on foot with this suitcase would work is absolutely beyond me. I'm sure she realised at one point that there was no hope in hell she'd come back from this, and throughout all interviews she remained silent, refusing to give her own version of the story. Despite her refusal to communicate, her trial began more than 1 year later, on October the 11th, 2022. Proceedings took place in courtroom 12 of the Old Bailey. The case was prosecuted by Deanna here and defended by Richard Jory, while the trial itself was presided over by Judge Richard Marks. Not only did Gemma Mitchell deny murdering Deborah, but she also declined to give evidence in her defense. Her defense team argued that there was no evidence to support the claim that Deborah's body had been stored in the suitcase due to the lack of DNA evidence, while there was also no evidence of a struggle at Deborah's house. The court was told that the injuries to her skull could have been sustained either by being pushed onto a surface or by a weapon, but ultimately no weapon was found at the crime scene or Deborah's home. No surprise, but the motive was money. The prosecution argued that Gemma Mitchell killed Mee Kuen Chong and then forged her will to get money to pay for house repairs. A distinct level of callousness came to light when it was noted that between the time of Deborah's murder and her trip to Salcombe, Gemma went on a date to London Zoo with someone she had met online. It is worth noting again that Gemma graduated with a human sciences degree, including a course in experimental anatomy. This means that she actually did have the skills to dismember a head from a body, although it's not clear why she did. It didn't take long for the jury to come to a decision, because following 7 hours of deliberation on October 27, 2022, Gemma Mitchell was formally found guilty of the murder of Mee Kuen Chong. Gemma's sentence made national headlines. Due to a change in UK law, the trial sentencing phase was televised, making Gemma the first convicted murderer in England and Wales to be sentenced on live television, and the first woman in the UK to have her sentence filmed.
The sentence of the court is one of life imprisonment, and the minimum term of imprisonment that you will in any event be required to serve will be 34 years. You set off early from your home address, taking with you a large suitcase, which it was evident from the CCTV was either empty or had very little in it. You went by public transport to her address, and you stayed there for over 5 hours. The suitcase that you had taken to the house was now very obviously full and heavy. I have no doubt that you had killed her whilst you were at her house, and, absent any explanation from you, given that you went no comment throughout your police interviews and did not go into the witness box, I am driven to the conclusion that you went to her house that morning with that intention in mind. You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial as to what you did, notwithstanding what, in my judgment, amounted to overwhelming evidence against you.
The sentence was life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 34 years. This means she will not be eligible for parole until the 10th of July 2055. During Gemma's trial, a statement made by Deborah's sister, who is based in Malaysia, was read to the court. In this statement she said, "We still do not understand how she died. Did she suffer? This mystery will haunt me forever." To this very day, Gemma has never accepted responsibility over the murder of Deborah, so some questions still remain unanswered. But to me, the motive is plain and simple. It is greed. The cold facts in this case are shocking, and it's very sad to know how Deborah's story came to an end. She was a vulnerable lady seeking help for a declining mental health. Not only had she leaned on Gemma for support, but she had even offered her a huge sum of money from her savings to help her friend out. And Gemma, she was clearly abusing her vulnerability for her own personal gain. And tragically, all of this would end through a genuinely despicable crime. Since her conviction, several former friends have come forward to share their own experiences of Gemma, and as it turns out, she has always been one to try and steal money and even partners. So I guess this means that this form of thinking is not a new one for Gemma, and as it turns out, she has always been a fucking snake. Anyway, I'm wrapping this one up today, folks. Thank you so much for watching another video today by Coffeehouse Crime. If you found this case interesting or you learned something new, then please subscribe to the channel, it does help me out. You know what to do by now, please leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, and as always, I'll see you again very soon for another video. Until that moment arrives though, please remember to look after each other, and of course, stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.